This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1128, Comic Talk Solo.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. This is episode 1128. It's a Comic Talk solo episode. This is coming a little bit later than normal. Usually we try to have our episodes come out on every Saturday or so. But unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. And so this is being produced on Monday, the 26th of January is what it is. So I live in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. So I was just part of the gigantic, snowfall and snowstorm that kind of hit the eastern seaboard, or I know it hit a lot of places. Anyways, it definitely hit Canada. It's interesting. It's a much more violent winter than we've had in the last couple of years, which have been a lot more mild. It's been extremely cold, and then we got a lot of snow to boot. I think we had a record snowfall for the month of January, shattering the record since they started doing those types of note keeping in terms of keeping track of how much snow had actually fallen. So a lot of snow. So originally this would have been a Book of the Month Club episode. Actually, technically it would have been next week. This was supposed to be an episode with Glenn Greenberg. Unfortunately, I had health complications, which necessitated moving the discussion. And unfortunately, he was unable to make it work on any of the replacement dates. So we're trying to work on scheduling. So unfortunately, I was kind of like, well, all right, I still need a Book of the Month Club. That would normally be next week. But at least at the time of this recording, I'm supposed to be recording with J.M. DeMatteis on Saturday, I guess the 30th or 31st of January. So I'm very excited to sit down and chat with him again, and that episode will be able to hopefully go up that same day. So that meant that Book of the Month Club needed to be today. Unfortunately, the usual suspects were unable to kind of get together on a Book of the Month Club. Nathan Strucker typically does these. He's a teacher. He's hip deep in marking as we speak, so he was unavailable. Paul Scores, who is less common on Book of the Month Clubs compared to Nate. He's about to jet off to a sunny climb in a day or two from the day I'm recording this, so he was unable to really focus on Book of the Month Club episodes. Tried conscripting my son, who was just not really interested this time around in recording. We had talked about maybe my wife doing one, but that just didn't quite come to fruition. So instead, this is a bit of a Comic Talk episode, or so far it's really just behind the scenes of the Comic Shenanigans podcast, like you never asked for. I do want to thank whoever out there downloaded the entire catalog of Comic Shenanigans episodes about less than a week ago. Thank you. It was weird looking at the spikes for the downloaded episodes, and it's just one day there's like over 1,000 downloads, and it was just all split between most of the catalog. So thank you for whoever you are. Thank you for coming aboard the Comic Shenanigans podcast. Hope you enjoy it. You just downloaded a lot of episodes, so hopefully you did those on purpose, or maybe you just clicked unplayed when you added the show and it just downloaded the entire back catalog. But however you came across us, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So this was, again, going to be Book of the Month Club. I had some ideas. Ended up deciding, chatting just with myself, and I know Ethan of the Forgotten Era podcast, the Spider-Man Forgotten Era podcast, would probably agree. It's not as much fun when you're just talking into a microphone on your own, talking about a specific issue per se. I mean, people do it, but I mean, I like the give and take in the discussion, and so there's less of that when it's just with myself. The book I had thought about the minute I saw how much snow there was, my mind immediately went to a classic issue from the Clone Saga of Spider-Man, which was actually the issue itself. The cover was for Part 2 of Media Blizzard, which would have been Amazing Spider-Man 408 by Mark Bagley. Just such a visually striking cover. I also do think of the Chris Bachalo and Zeb Wells Brand New Day era storyline with, was it Wolverine and Spider-Man? I did not love Bachalo on that era of Spider-Man. I found it at times to be hard to read and kind of confusing in terms of a storytelling standpoint. So I didn't really want to read that again necessarily, but I did read Media Blizzard again. So I will say continues to be fun and, very, mid-90s book. Still don't love I do kind of like the redesign of Mysterio. I just don't know if there's any point to it. There's just something about the fishbowl that is so special that kind of taking it away and not really giving something that is quite as cool. Although there's something to the kind of the straps and the coloring kind of makes it look interesting, and then kind of having this smoky visage is really cool. Reading that storyline, Media Blizzard, is interesting how different the different takes on the art were. That when you read them all kind of jumbled together, it's a lot. Like the first one, so the first chapter is in Sensational Spider-Man #1, which is by Dan Jurgens, who's writer and artist, and Klaus Janson is finishing artist. And it very much feels, and this is true of everything that Dan Jurgens did on Sensational with Klaus. Klaus is a great finisher, but it definitely feels like a Klaus book. Like, I'm a huge fan of Dan Jurgens, but I realize when I read this type of stuff and I see some of the choices being made that I associate very strongly Dan Jurgens with Brett Breeding on inks, or someone similar, in terms of a certain heroic style. And so when you see this here, this is a lot darker, kind of visual tone. The inks are definitely add a very different dimension to people's faces. There isn't, no one looks quite as attractive as they do typically in a Jurgens book. So you have that, and this kind of scratchier mentality or perspective on the art. And then you go to the next issue, which is Amazing Spider-Man 408, Media Blizzard Part 2. And now you have artwork by Mark Bagley with Larry Malstad on inks, I should say. And it could not be more different because it's so clean, so polished. There's no rough edges here. It's an extremely elegant line work, and you could tell this both in pencils and inks. And then you go to chapter 3, which is in, I guess, Spider-Man, I can't even make it out here, Spider-Man 65, and you've got John Romita Jr. and Tom Morgan are credited as the pencilers, with Al Williamson and Dick Giordano as the inkers, and this is very different. It's a dirtier, darker feeling book. Now, you can tell the spots that aren't JRJR, they stand out like a sore thumb. Like, they're just, especially because it's a lot of like character work on Ben Reilly and his face, and like, I don't know, there's nothing like a John Romita Jr. face. So when it's not John Romita Jr., it's extremely evident, and then when it is, again, it's very obvious. Overall, like, I've always liked it as a kind of a fun storyline. There is something special about seeing Spider-Man in the snow. And that's what was really interesting, too, is that, like, when you read even just the first few pages of the JRJR issue, which, again, would have had Al Williamson inking them, there's so much snow. Like, there's a lot of splotchiness on the snow. Like, every panel is just dripping with snow. And you do see the snow in, like, the Amazing Spider-Man issue, but it doesn't feel as pervasive. There's something about it. It doesn't feel as claustrophobic. There are certain parts in the Spider-Man issue by JRJR where the snow effect is just so claustrophobic, you feel like you cannot get away from it. And you kind of feel that way, too, with the Klaus Janson one. You feel, again, a lot of the snow there as well, which is interesting to see. And one of my favorite things that you don't see as much anymore, but I think this was definitely a tried and true trope of Spider-Man comics, is the idea of, like, you open up to an issue and you have, someone sitting there standing next to some newspapers, and someone thwips a newspaper and then throws down some change, and it's Spider-Man thwipping off with some, to read the news and be introduced to kind of the main thrust of the story in some way, which is definitely what you get in Media Blizzard, which is not super complicated. It's basically like Mysterio has a new plot, and he has a television station, but it's using this new special chip to, be able to create a kind of mass mind control. And so all the ratings are up, but it's not real. It's very, it's not a super complicated Mysterio plot, but it is fun. And it kind of brings back Armada, who would have been in issue 0 of Sensational Spider-Man. So it was a fun time. So that was my original idea, was to do a Book of the Month Club on that. I don't know if there was enough meat in the bone for me to do it on my own, per se, but I've just given you a little bit of a once-over on what that storyline was about. It's fascinating to me that the way in which they decided to kind of bring everything back when Ben Reilly became Spider-Man, because, again, very of the time, you don't have a Sensational Spider-Man 1 first, you have 0. So 0 is where it all kicks off, and you have that Return of Spider-Man month, and then you have the first, you're like, okay, let's move on. Oh, let's do a crossover. The first issue of Sensational Spider-Man is just part 1 of a 3-part crossover. Like, they just could not break themselves free of this. And it's interesting because I'd have to remember, I don't remember all the sequencing, but like Spectacular Spider-Man wasn't even part of that. Like, why did it not get the good fortune to be part 4 of that storyline instead of as a 3-parter? So that was interesting. I was at my brother-in-law's tonight. He's about to go, as I said before, go off to Sunnier Climb shortly. And we were talking about, things he was loading up on his iPad to make sure he would read while he was gone. And one of the books I told him that he should definitely take a look at, which I'm now holding the trade of with the first 6 issues, is Assorted Crisis Events. And I think everyone's talking about this. So this is not a book that is, I think, being slept on. This is a book that is being lauded by everyone. It's written by Dennis Camp. Artwork is by Eric Zawadsky, and colors by Jordi Belair. Now, the color is by Jordi Belair. First of all, I remember loving Jordi Belair's colors on Manhattan Projects. And there are sequences here which remind me so much of how beautiful and deceptively simple the color work was on that particular book. And so I love the colors here, but it's very specifically Jordi Belair. There's just something about some of the choices and the tones being used, which are brilliant. But, I mean, as much as I love the ideas that Dennis Camp is putting on page here, I do think Eric Zawadsky is really taking, on a book where the writing is already so sharp and so insightful and brilliant, the artwork by Zawadsky is next level. It is trying to do things, not just trying, it is doing things that are so experimental with the form and just trying new ideas in terms of panel breakage. And again, the colors by Belair really play a part in this. One of my favorite issues, I'm trying to see the actual issue number, it's the guy who's kind of speeding quickly through his life. It feels like every moment time is slipping away from him, which is, very true. It definitely is. It's a fantastic issue. It's issue 4, Time Flies. There's just certain elements here that reminded me so much visually of seeing Jordi Belair's artwork on the Oppenheimer issues of Manhattan Projects, particularly the first issue, in terms of the blue and the reds. I don't know if that was kind of a conscious decision here in terms of it almost felt like a reference to that work, but at the same time isn't. I do think at some point I'll probably do a more cohesive breakdown on Assorted Crisis Events Volume 1, which is why I didn't end up actually kind of trying to do kind of a half-assed Book of the Month Club just on my own. That is one I would like to have either Nathan or Paul on the episode at some point to talk about, because it's just so good. It's such a fantastic book. Not that I had slept on it, but I had heard it was so good. I read the first couple issues and I kind of fell away from it for a while, not on purpose. And then I read, actually, I think even before I read some of the ones that are in the trade, I'd read a copy of issue 8, and that issue just floored me as well. So it continues to reward the reader. I'm very curious, if there was ever an idea or how long he thought the book would go, but hopefully it just keeps going, because so far, it's just really insightful. And what's fascinating about it, if you think about it, is it's basically just an anthology book. It's a new character kind of every issue, although sometimes you see one particular character in the background of multiple issues. And they're just kind of doing a brand new story. And, that in this day and age, either it's going to really work or it really won't. And it's fascinating how it just grabs you and you're in. And then your next issue, I don't know what I'm going to get from this. And you're oh, wow, they found a whole new idea here. And yet it is still brilliant. So this has been, such a great thing to be reading. I do want to talk about upcoming episodes of the Comic Shenanigans podcast while I have a moment. There's some great stuff that I'm looking forward to. Actually, I was just in the last couple of days just trying to schedule a bunch of upcoming interviews. So we have a new one for the show, because we've had a lot of returning guests lately. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we do have Scott Hanna is going to be coming on the show soon. Really excited to talk with him. This will probably be in the next couple of weeks. As I mentioned, Jim DeMatteis is coming on to talk about Spider-Man 94, which just concluded its run in the last week or two. We have Alex Segura coming back on the show at the end of February. He'll be recording, so it'll probably come out in March, talking about the Dick Tracy ongoing. That one, I read the first issue of Dick Tracy, and then I kind of fell away from it, but I've been wanting to go back to it. And what better reason to go back to something than interviewing the creator? So I'm excited to kind of do a deep dive back into Dick Tracy so we can kind of go through it. We did briefly talk about Dick Tracy before in the previous episode that Alex had done for the show. Now, that particular episode was much more focused, obviously, on Daredevil because he had a Daredevil-related book that came out at that point in time, which was on Daredevil, the visual history. So this time we're actually going to be talking about just, focusing more on Dick Tracy itself. For that previous interview, you can check out episode 1118. It was recorded November the 11th, posted November the 15th. So just a couple months ago. So you definitely should take a look at that. So excited to have them back on the show. As always, I keep trying to reschedule with Ron Friends. Life keeps getting in the way, but we are going to at some point talk about Thor, I promise. We're going to make our way through his Thor Epic Collection runs. He's been having other projects and other 10-page stories, and we've been getting into process work on that. So we just haven't been able to get back to Thor in a little while. Jed Winnick's going to be coming on the show soon, talking about The Mighty, which is a Hilo presents The Mighty. So it's not a Hilo book proper, but it is an upcoming book, I believe, in that universe. I know he mentioned it last year when I interviewed him. It's been a little while. I'd have to refresh my memory on it. And I knew the book comes out, I believe, in the next week or so. So I'm excited to read that. Pat Olive will be coming back on the show, probably not until March or April. He was obviously recently on the show to talk about a few projects. We're going to talk about Rough Riders, which is a book I really love that came out from Aftershock Comics in the last decade. There was 3 different miniseries they did with, I believe, Adam Glass. And then Glenn Greenberg, as I aforementioned, or previously had mentioned that he was going to be on the show more recently. We're going to talk about a bunch of things. Superman versus Hulk, as well as there was a Moon Knight series he edited in the late 90s that I'm excited to talk to him about, as well as a Star-Lord series, which the Star-Lord series isn't about Peter Quill at all. It's about a different character. The Moon Knight, I was really intrigued by. And this is something I'll obviously get into when I talk to him on the show. I have not read a lot of Moon Knight, and I think most of the Moon Knight that I have experienced has been kind of since the mid 2000s when they kind of revolutionized the character. I think it was Daniel Houston or one of the Houstons, and it was David Finchart, and it was really starting to change the idea of like what Khonshu was and what Mark Spector was, and then eventually they obviously did all the stuff with all the different personalities, and that's the version you're kind of seeing more on TV. But that's obviously not the Doug Menck version, and like it's gone a long way away from what Moon Knight originally was. So when I was talking to Glenn about what we should be talking about when he came on the show, again, we talked about, we should talk about some of the stuff that, you've worked on or they edited. And that's kind of where we came in on, okay, let's talk about his time, editing a Moon Knight book. Speaking of, kind of upcoming interviews that we're working on but have not scheduled yet, I'm also hoping to have DG Chichester back on the show soon. I was kind of looking at like what stuff of his that he's proud of that we haven't really had a chance to, that hasn't been given its flowers. And one idea that came up was actually Night Stalkers, which I've never read, and I think there's 6 issues of Marvel Unlimited. What's interesting about it is that if you've been listening to our most recent kind of not book of the month creator spotlight episodes, we recently did one with one of the Kubert brothers talking about I believe it was Spirits of Vengeance number 1, and it's interesting because this Night Stalkers part number 1 is actually part 5 of that storyline, which is Rise of the Midnight Sun. So I'm really excited to talk about that with DG at some point, as Ron Garnier which I'm really excited to read as well. So I think that'll be fun. That's another kind of upcoming episode. If we're just kind of looking at the future of Comic Shenanigans, and I love doing interviews. At times it can be. I find either I have so many interviews and I'm banking episodes and it's great and I have a whole schedule, or I'm in the middle of like trying to find people or trying to reach out to people and trying to schedule. And then, if you've ever had to work around other people's schedules, sometimes it can be challenging, and also just trying to keep it all straight in your own head. Christos Gage has said that he would likely come back on the show as well. So I'm really excited to talk to Christos because, he's done work on Battle World recently. They did with Marcus Toe, amongst other things. So excited to have him on the show at some point as well. So yeah, a lot of good stuff coming up for Comic Shenanigans. I do want to, on a somber note, and I'm not going to quite end the show yet, but as I record this is the evening that I guess it's kind of going around that Sal Buscema, legendary comic book artist, has passed away, which is extremely sad. I guess he would have been 90 had he made it to today, which is January 26th as I record this. But he died a few days ago on January the 23rd. At least that's when being circulated right now. And it's, it's tremendously sad. And there's also this link to a certain era. Obviously, I never had him on the show, but he's done, I think, a few podcasts with Spider-Girl somewhere out there. What a tremendous artist. Obviously, from a family of artists, him and his brother were major forces in comic book history. John Buscema obviously was Sal's brother, but Sal had, had a 10-year run as artist of the Incredible Hulk. He was 8-year run as artist on Spectacular Spider-Man. I'm going to be speaking with Jan and Mateus soon, and obviously he's so inextricably linked to Sal because of their time working on Spectacular Spider-Man together, which also had the unfortunate highlight of being not highlight, but the distinction of being unreprinted for years until we finally got the omnibus last year collecting their work together, which is nice to finally be able to have access to that and have people experiencing it who never had the chance before because they weren't around when the singles were out and it wasn't available digitally for the longest time either. So, but Sal obviously is probably most remembered either for Spider-Man or for Hulk, but really he had worked on everyone. Good friend of the show, Ron Friends, obviously worked with him many times over the years, but Sal doing inks over him, especially on Spider-Girl, as he was doing less pencils, but he was still inking. What a legend. So much work that he put out there into the world. I do feel like in many ways he was never really truly properly appreciated. Like he was almost not taken for granted, but because he was just always there, always a stalwart, always delivering such fantastic work. I've said many times on the show that unfortunately, one of the first times I was ever really exposed to his artwork, I did not like it. But I realized in the years since, it was more the inks by Bill Sikovich, who I just love his art on his own, but just never felt that he was the right fit for Sal Buscema. And in the Clone Saga, that's who was inking Sal. Then going back and reading stuff like The Child Within or his Hulk work, when you have people doing, a much more appropriate ink line on him, you can really see how strong his storytelling is, how he was able to convey with a relatively simple line. It's interesting too, if you read his Spectacular Spider-Man, and it's coming out at the time of like Bagley and, Larson and McFarlane, you have these people doing hyper rendered lines and then you have someone doing something so simple yet complex. And it's one of those things, again, where when I was younger, I was definitely swayed by all the flashiness of the other artists. Mark Bagley has always been a favorite of mine. But then you look at what Buscema was doing, it's just so good. And his storytelling is so on point. And again, he just comes from this specific storytelling era where it was less about splash and more about telling a really concise, complete story in visual art. And it's just fantastic. So, salute to Sal Buscema. He gave us so much amazing work. Next month, when we do our Creator Spotlight, we're likely going to be talking about Sal and kind of looking at early work of his, kind of later work, and there's also something from kind of the midpoint. I haven't quite narrowed it all down yet. I think Avengers will likely be the first thing we talk about. The last one, I'm not sure what the last piece of work that we'll be zeroing in on. He had done obviously some work here and there as backups and special stories over the last while, but he hadn't done like a full sequential sequence in a while, besides doing inks over someone like Ron Friends. But excited to break down some of his work when we do that next month. And again, tremendous artist, tremendous legacy in comics, and he will obviously be missed. It feels like he was still working till relatively recently as an inker. Again, often doing inks over Ron Friends, and they had such a tremendous partnership and friendship. And at some point when I have Ron back on the show, it's going to be impossible not to bring up Sal because obviously he meant so much to Ron as an artist and as a colleague and someone who worked with him. And the joke I would always joke that I always wanted Ron to do a commission for me. I've obviously been able to acquire a number of original art pages from him, but I was at some point would love to get an original commission from Ron because he's just one of my favorite artists. He's such a wonderful guy, wonderful storyteller. And I would say, like, I just don't know what to ask you for. And he's like, Adam, I know what you mean. I'm the same with Sal. That he always had the opportunity to kind of ask Sal to draw him something, but he could never really quite ask, like, what do you ask Sal Buscema to draw, who's drawn everything. And unfortunately now Sal has left us, so that's an incredible loss, obviously, for the comic book community, and just also for comic book history, because he was that, one of those artistic links to another era that we're really losing a lot of people from that time. So anyway, hats off to Sal Buscema. Sort of leave this on a dour note, I will say, as a positive thing. I'm very excited to watch the new Wonder Man Disney Plus television series that is coming out the day after I record this. Who knows what that's going to be? I'm excited to see him and Ben. Trevor Slattery, portrayed by Ben Kingsley, will be on the show as well. Excited to see what that even looks like, and excited. It's so stupid, but I'm really curious about run times. I think there's 8 episodes, and they're all kind of dumping them. I think I heard it's like 3.5 hours if you were to watch them all, which means they're not that long. But hopefully they have a good sense of pacing, and I'm excited to give that a shot. I'm excited for some of the Marvel content we're getting this year. We're not getting a movie until a Brand New Day. Spider-Man Brand New Day, I should say, which is in July, and then we get Avengers Doomsday in December, which I really hope it's good. I am tired of all the rhetoric and people really just taking it to Marvel all the time. Not every movie's gonna be great, and maybe their best stuff is behind them, but they're still trying to make stuff, and and hopefully it's good. And I'm tired of people like Rob Liefeld. I appreciate Rob for a lot of things. I love that he's a cheerleader for comics. I just feel like he is such obviously an axe to grind against Marvel and Kevin Feige and all them, and it just feels like he's constantly drubbing them and talking about stuff, and I'm just like, I don't care. After a while I just tune it out, because it's just a lot. If you don't like the movies, that's fine, but I don't need to hear about whether or not they're all making money. At the end of the day, did you like the movie? I liked Fantastic Four First Steps last year. I enjoyed Thunderbolts. The Captain America 4 was fine. It wasn't the best movie I've ever seen, but it's far from the worst. And I had a good time at the movie theater with my son, and that's all I kind of wanted. I want to be able to go to a movie and watch an enjoyable experience with my kid. And I'm excited for Doomsday and Brand New Day for that, because I think Zach, did I take him to No Way Home? I think so. But it was after it had first come out. It must have been a few months in. I'm actually not sure if I took him to see it in the theater or not. But although I think I did. But I'm excited to actually be able to take him to a brand new Spider-Man movie on opening day. That's the dream. I still remember seeing the first Spider-Man movie in 2002. I remember skipping school. I had asked my teacher. My English teacher, I was going to go see the first show noon or whatever. It's before they did 7 o'clock shows the night before on a Thursday. They did not do that at the time, so you had to see it Friday noon. Matinee was the first show. I was going to see it twice opening day actually, but I wanted to see it at that first showing. So I'd asked my English teacher, my Writerscraft teacher, and I was like, I really want to go see this movie. Is it okay if I leave class early? She's like, well, what movie? And I'm like, Spider-Man. And she's like, oh yeah, of course. Because we were doing journals at that point, and every day I was talking about this movie. I just was so excited, could not wait. And I went to my I had to spare in the afternoon, but I did have one course, and I went to my history teacher, and I was like, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be at the movies. And he's like, well, what movie? I'm like, Spider-Man. He's like, you have to go. And I will always remember kind of getting up in the middle of class, in that Writerscraft class, and walking out, and everyone's like, where's he going? And I'm like, going to see Spider-Man. And they're all like, was that an option? Were you just allowed to leave? And she's like, well, Adam's special. So I got to go see that movie. And so that'll always be a very special memory for me. And so being able to see Spider-Man Brand New Day with my son in theaters will be really exciting. Being able to see a brand new Avengers movie in theaters with him will be exciting too, because when Endgame came out, he would have been 5.5 years old. It's crazy. How old that Endgame already is. He's watched it, and actually when they bring it out in theaters in I believe September, if they do that in Canada as well, I would love to see that with him. Obviously he's seen it numerous times, but it does hit differently. Seeing it on a big screen, that's really exciting. So anyway, thank you for listening to this prattling and and droning on and on episode of Comic Shenanigans. This was fun. We'll have our more regularly scheduled content soon with guests, and we'll have interviews soon, and we'll be back to creator commentaries and proper Book of the Month clubs. But thanks again for indulging me for this episode. You can email me at comicshenanigans@gmail.com, rate the show on Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify. And thanks again. Wherever you are, thank you for listening, and we really appreciate it. Bye-bye.